Good morning, Grace Chapel family. Great to be here with you, looking at Job chapter 4, picking up where we left off yesterday. We're going to dive into it here in a second. I just want to start by giving you again the background. So, chapter 3, all the things that happened to Job. Sorry, my glasses are a little fuzzy there. Chapter 4, Job's response. End of chapter 3, his friends come up, they show up. And they just sit with him for 7 days. And after 7 days, Job has a response that we see in chapter 3. Beginning chapter 4 and 5 is where we see Eliphaz, one of Job's friends that decides to speak. We're going to see his response to what Job says here in a moment. The rest of the book, up until around chapter 37, 38, is conversations between Job and his friends, or another young man who wanders in on the way. These individuals that are having this conversation with Job, it's quite the back and forth. And it probably occurs over days. But there's a lot of things that are addressed specifically in these chapters that is actually really important because it continues to be perpetuated in society and even in Christian culture today. And so it's something that we could be wise to read through and see what's being said. So today we're going to be looking at Eliphaz, his response to Job. We're going to be looking at in chapter 4 and chapter 5. And then tomorrow in chapter 6, we're going to take a look at Job's response to Eliphaz. I don't know that we're going to do the whole book, but I think we're going to get some of the major sections of the book, as I said before, and begins that dialogue back and forth. Something that's important for you as the reader to know as you're reading through the book of Job is that just because Eliphaz or one of these other men says it doesn't make it true. And so this is where we have to be cautious in our reading of Scripture, that we're not reading and just saying every word of it's true, and then we take a verse out of context. I.e., let me give you an example. The devil, when he's Satan in the garden, and he says, "You shall not surely die." We can't read that passage and say, "See, this is true." We have to read it in the context, recognizing it as Satan saying something that's coming against the truth of God in the story. And so we can't pull anything that Eliphaz says apart from the story. Maybe he's saying something that's true that coincides with the rest of Scripture, but we just have to be really wise in dealing with his statements and some of the other statements of the other friends, as well as Job. So let's go ahead and dive into the text. It's a fairly lengthy section, so stick with me. Put yourself in the story. Job he's just absolutely desolate. He's lost all of his children. He's lost all of his possessions. He himself bodily is harmed. He's got sores all over him. His appearance is no longer someone you'd recognize. He's shaved his head. He's bald. You see these three men that are sitting with him for 7 days and 7 nights, and Job just got done just expressing his utter despair and his desire that his life would have never been he'd never been alive. And so you then hear Eliphaz speak up after Job gives this kind of despairing voice. And then let's listen to what happens next. Chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, If one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Yet who can keep from speaking? Behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have upheld him who was stumbling, and you have made firm the feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? Remember who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. But by the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion, the teeth of the young lions are broken. The strong lion perishes for lack of prey, and the cubs and lionesses are scattered. Now a word has brought to me stealthily. My ear received it, the whisper of it. Amid thoughts from visions of the night, where the deep sleep falls on men, dread came upon me, and trembling, which made all of my bones shake. A spirit glided by my face, the hair of my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes, there was silence, and I heard a voice. Verse 17. Can mortal man be right before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust. In his angels he charges with error. How much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is the dust, and who are crushed like the moth. Between morning and evening they are beaten to pieces. They are perished forever without anyone regarding it. Is not their tent cord plucked up with them? Do they not die? And that without wisdom. Call now if there is anyone who will answer you. To which of the holy ones will you turn? Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. I have seen the fool take root, but suddenly I cursed his dwelling. His children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate, and there is no one able to deliver them. The hungry eat his harvest, and he takes it even out of thorns, and the thirsty pant after his wealth. For affliction does not come up from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground, but man is born to trouble as sparks fly upward. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. Who does great things and unsearchable marvelous things without number? He gives rain on the earth and sends water on the fields. He sets the high in those who are lowly, and those who are mourn are lifted to safety. He frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. And he catches the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to a quick end. They meet with darkness in the daytime and grope about at noonday as in the night. But he saves the needy from the sword of their mouth and from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts her mouth. Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he binds up. He shatters, but his hands heal. He will deliver you from 6 troubles, and in 7th no evil shall touch you. In famine he will redeem you from death, and in war the power of the sword. You shall not be hidden from the lash of the tongue, and shall not fear destruction when it comes. At destruction and famine you shall laugh, and you shall not fear the beasts of the earth. For you shall be in league with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your tent is at peace, and you shall inspect your fold and miss nothing. You shall know that your offspring shall bring many, and your descendants as the grass of the earth. You shall come up to your grave in ripe old age, like a sheaf gathered in its season. Behold, this we have searched out. It is true. Hear and know it for your good. So I want to break down a little bit of what Eliphaz says. He says a lot of things. I just want to break down just a couple things. I want to get the form of his argument is all I'm going to try to do with you today. What is the form of what he says? Now, verse 2, obviously we have Eliphaz. Verse 1 tells us Eliphaz the Temanite, one of the men that came to speak with Job, be with Job and help him in his suffering. Notice how he's very cautious in the beginning. Verse 2 says, if one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Eliphaz, after listening to Job kind of describe, after sitting with him for 7 days, Eliphaz has been a good friend. And he looks at Job and he says, if I attempt to communicate with you, are you going to become impatient with me? Are you going to be mad at me? Are you going to be upset? Because given what I see in the circumstances that you're dealing with, I can't keep from speaking. I can't keep from speaking. I have to say something. And that's how he starts. Then from there in verse 3, we see that he appeals to Job's righteousness. And he says, behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have upheld him who have stumbled, and you have made firm the feeble knees. So when people are struggling, when they're dealing with difficulty, Job's been the one that's come alongside to support them and to help them and to instruct them and to uphold them. And so Eliphaz seems to desire to do the same for Job, possibly something that Job has done for him in the past. And so verse 5 is very interesting to me. He says, but now it has come to you. and you are impatient. And it touches you, and you are dismayed. Now, the question comes down to, what is it? He doesn't say what it is. Well, there's an assumption here in the text. The assumption is that judgment has come. Judgment has come against you. And there's been something evil in you, and God's judgment has befallen you. And the reason why we come to that is verse 6. He says, it's not the fear of God your confidence, the integrity of your ways your hope. And what he's saying is, well, Job, if you had fear of God and you had integrity, you wouldn't be feeling this way. You wouldn't be looking this way. You wouldn't be responding this way. And so notice right off the bat, Eliphaz assumes that Job has done something to deserve the circumstances that he's in. Now look at verse 7. This is important. He says, remember. Now he says, remember. Who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? Now, in this assumption, Eliphaz is saying, righteous people do not suffer judgment from God. That's what he's saying. Innocent, righteous, upright people do not suffer judgment of God. Obviously, what Job is enduring is judgment of God. And so, obviously, the fear of God and the integrity, which was your confidence and your hope, is gone because you've not done something right. And in fact, verse 8, as I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. And he uses kind of an analogy from agriculture and say, look, if you plow and what you're plowing is iniquity, guess what's going to come up? Iniquity. And if you sow, that's to throw the seeds out, and you sow trouble, guess what's going to sprout? Trouble. And so he's saying, look, righteous people don't suffer punishment from God, and those who do iniquity, they get trouble. And so he then goes in and he begins talking verses 9 through 11, kind of the trouble that gets reaped by those who do evil. And then verse 12, it's interesting. We see this thing that occurs, and there's a lot of conversation around verses 12 through 17 or 19. This is a very interesting thing that occurs. Eliphaz says, from what I can tell and from what I've read, that he receives some sort of vision in the nighttime. So he gets a word, a vision, and he says he hears it, and it was a whisper. And he was in the middle of the night, verse 13. He was amid his thoughts, as many of you may be as well in the nighttime. And it's right when you're starting to kind of get visions, or when you're seeing thoughts or thinking about the next day or whatever else, right about when deep sleep falls upon men. So it's right when you're getting into that really good sleep, you start getting dreams and those kind of things. He says that verse 14, dread came upon him. So right in the middle of his dreaming sequence, dread falls upon him, and trembling which made all of his bones shake. So there is this fear that grasps him. And he describes a spirit that glided past his face, and he describes the hair on his flesh standing up, right? The kind of the goosebumps on the back of your neck, and your hair stands on end. And in verse 16, he says, it stood still, the spirit, but I couldn't discern its appearance. I couldn't tell you what it looked like. But there was a form before his eyes. There was silence. It was just deathly quiet. And then he hears a voice. And the voice says this, can mortal man be right before God? Can man be pure before his maker? Asks a question. And the question is an interesting one. Can someone who's mortal be right before God? And can man be pure before his maker? The Spirit then continues in his statement. He says, even in his servants he puts no trust, and in his angels he charges with error. So even the angels have fallen. Even the angels struggle. Even the angels have moral failings. So if those angels who are made of different material than us, made differently, how much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation, who's created out of the dust, and ultimately who are crushed like a moth. If you've ever seen a moth, and you've ever had to like squash one to kill it, I mean, they turn to dust. Like there's nothing to them. They don't have an exoskeleton like a lot of other insects do. And you look at verse 20, it's very interesting how he describes it. He says, between morning and evening, they're beaten to pieces. They perish forever without anyone regarding it. It's very little regard for a moth. And he says, is not their tent cord plucked up with them, and they do not die. Do they not die in that without wisdom? Moths don't even recognize their existence. And he says, how much more is mortal man like a moth? So he kind of goes pretty harsh on him, and then he talks about God's actions against the fool, against those who are doing evil, against those who are doing wrong, against the fool, the simple. And he talks about how basically the judgments that come to those people oftentimes are a result of their own actions. And then verse 6, ultimately, he kind of gives a affliction does not come from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. But as a man is born to trouble, a spark flies upward. So there is trouble that does just happen. But in a sense, affliction doesn't just come from nowhere. It comes from the actions of man. So verse 8, as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. And so he then says, you need to seek God. You need to commit your cause to God. You need to plead your case before God. And you need to do right, and you need to stop doing whatever it was that was wrong. And he then goes on some sort of praise of God and what God does, the marvelous things that God does, and then what specifically God does against those who create trouble and who are in sin. He then, verse 17, assumes the state of Job is something of justice or discipline. He says, behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves, therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty. This is similar to what we see in Hebrews. The idea that Eliphaz is saying, look, Job, you did something wrong, and that's the reason why you've got this happening to you. And so don't despise what God does. With the wounds that he inflicts, he's going to heal. But you need to turn, and you need to do right. And that's what verses 19 through 26 says. The blessings of the Lord to those who do right. So the Lord will deliver Job, and all the things that are bad will not fall upon him. It's possible to not fear the destruction. In fact, you can even laugh at it. You won't miss anything. Your family's going to be great, and at the end of your full life, you'll have a plentiful harvest. And what Eliphaz is saying to Job is he's saying, Job, just do the right thing, and God will do right by you. Like, obviously you did something wrong, and you've been judged for it, so just take your licks and go back to the way things were. Go back to doing right, acknowledge your error, and God will restore you. And he insists, verse 27, behold, we have searched this out. It is true. Hear and know it for your own good. He insists, he says, Job, we've seen this. We've seen this over and over again for our entire life. We know this is true, that God rewards good behavior and punishes bad. And so if you're being punished and if something bad's happening to you, it's your own fault. And he says, hear this and know it. I say it for your good. And now we, as the reader, are sitting here, and we know that Eliphaz is wrong. We know that Job has done nothing wrong to deserve this. But this is to stop us and think. When something bad happens to someone, do you already prejudge that it's God judging them for something they've done? You don't know that. You can't know that case. And certainly sometimes we see the evidence of that when someone's done something wrong and it bites them, right? We see that. But we can't always know that every situation that someone's enduring is punishment due to their evil. And so because of that, this should caution every reader to not make this assumption. This begins the assumption that's throughout the entire book, that God rewards good, punishes evil, and if something bad's happened to you, it's your fault. And so this is something that we are going to attack throughout the entire book, and that Job is going to plead his case against. Sorry for the little extra time this morning, but I wanted to get that idea across, as that's going to be huge as we go through the rest of the book of Job. God bless you all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I look forward to seeing you again real soon.